Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 17 Part 2 Ice Slayer Hunting. Meanwhile, in a small meeting room at the White Tiger Guild. That's all I know, Jean ended her statement. Although President Beck had recommended she get some rest first, Jean had insisted that she had gotten plenty of rest inside the Red Gate and wanted the investigation to start immediately. The two leading the inquiry, President Beck and Managerin, were speechless. Kitchell, who had been in charge of the raid, was currently at the association to follow up on how to handle the situation, so it was only the three of them in the room. Sangnin broke the silence. Is all of this true? You can ask Myungwon and Kajum. They'll tell you the same thing. The two men had gone straight home, saying they missed their families. Jean guaranteed that their testimonies would be no different from hers. I only told them what I saw with my own eyes. For example, she told them she'd hear ice bears screaming in the distance inside the forest whenever Jinwoo wasn't with them, and she'd see him get up at night to do push-ups while everyone else was asleep. She said nothing about what the others had seen or heard, only things she'd witnessed herself. HNGH. Sangin made a sound that could have been a gasp or a groan. Jinwoo could knock out an A-rank hunter with one punch, manipulate space as he wished, and summon a few dozen of his own soldiers. It was all hard to believe, but the most shocking thing was, President Beck broke his silence and stated, Jinwoo-sung cleared a high-rank dungeon almost entirely by himself. It was very possible he was an S-rank hunter. Incredible. Even though he'd fought alongside minions he'd summoned, they were not his partners, but rather part of Jinwoo's skill. Which was to say, Jinwoo truly had solo cleared the dungeon. Even if you're a very high-rank hunter, it's extremely difficult to clear a dungeon on your own. On top of that, it had been a red gate. On his own, Beck might be able to clear a B-rank gate. Jinwoo's feat was possible only because he had the means to summon a large number of his own soldiers. Sangin marveled. Jinwoo is definitely an awakened being with rare abilities. Yunho agreed. It's unusual enough for a hunter to be able to control one summoned creature, but one who can summon a whole army of them. Since becoming an active S-rank hunter, Yunho had met countless other skilled hunters, but he'd never heard of that kind of skill. He's an awakened being with skills on a completely different level. The president was truly amazed. A question suddenly popped into Songmin's head. In terms of net worth, how valuable is Jinwoo now? Yunho had no answer. But one thing was clear. Whatever Jinwoo was worth right now, his value would increase exponentially as soon as he was reevaluated, which was why they needed to recruit him before then. The White Tiger Guild had already lost an A-rank and several B-rank hunters. If they couldn't recruit Jinwoo, who was a great boon, the loss would be immeasurable. I have faith in you, Managerin. As President Beck sent him a trusting look, Songmin's face filled with determination. Just then, both Yunho and Sangin looked over to Heejin. She was holding up her hand. President Beck asked, Did you have a question? Now that she had their attention, she put down her hand. Please let me help you. With what? With recruiting our capta? I mean, Hunter Jinwoo Sung. Yunho and Sangin exchanged looks before turning back to Heejin again. Sangmin, the one in charge of recruitment, cocked his head. But why would you? Because I've spent more time with him than anyone in our guild, so I think I can help. Although it had only been 6 hours in real time, she'd spent almost a week with Jinwoo in the Red Gate. It was a reasonable suggestion. It didn't hurt that she was also attractive, which could be a useful tool for recruitment. As soon as Heejin sensed that they were about to cave, she added, There's one condition, though. Beck raised an eyebrow. What is it? If Jinwoo joins the White Tiger Guild, please put me in his strike squad, no questions asked. She'd had a revelation about just how horrifying high-rank gates were, and how powerless she could be once inside. It's what Jinwoo was trying to teach Songi. It was humiliating, but what could she do? Pretending that something scary wasn't actually scary was dumb and reckless. What she'd experienced inside the Red Gate had certainly been terrifying. However, she couldn't give up the spoils and status she enjoyed as a B-rank hunter. The high annual salary, the countless benefits, the social recognition. Despite the risk, it was the perfect occupation. After all, it was high risk and high return. But Heejin had discovered a way to mitigate that risk. Raids with the captain. The person she'd envied the most inside the Red Gate was none other than Songi, and it was for one reason only. It was because of something Jinwoo had promised her. I brought you here, so I promised to take responsibility and protect you. In other words, he wasn't responsible for protecting any members other than Songi. The rest of them were just extras. The whole time they were together, Heejin had worried that Jinwoo and Songi would secretly leave the party. And then on the 6th day, Jinwoo really had cleared the high-rank dungeon by himself and sent Songi Han home safely. He kept his promise. After witnessing all that, Heejin was convinced. If she went on raids in Jinwoo's squad, she would always be safe. Just the thought made her heart race. He was calm, cool, and collected, had amazing abilities, and carried a sense of responsibility. She wanted her next raid to be with Jinwoo again, so that was her sole demand. Put me in the strike squad led by Jinwoo Sung. President Beck and Sangnan discussed the matter, and then... Sounds good, President Beck guffawed. So for now, you will work with manager and... Thank you. Scouting Jinwoo wouldn't be easy, that's for sure. Jinwoo was well aware of how valuable his abilities were. Even inside the Red Gate, he overflowed with confidence. Convincing him to join the guild wasn't going to be easy. Still, she'd have a chance to see him again. Heejin hid her smile from the others. President Beck was lost in his thoughts, but finally decided to ask. Managerin. Yes. I would like Jinwoo's number, please. Sir, that's... Sangnan explained to President Beck why he'd been hiding Jinwoo. Yunho mulled it over, then nodded in understanding. I get why he wants to hide his abilities, even though he's so great. Some people in the world just want to go unnoticed. A man with that kind of personality had just revealed his secret abilities in front of other people. Of course, he'd been in a dangerous situation, but it most likely meant that he was also self-assured enough to slowly reveal himself to the world. As long as things don't blow up, Jinwoo can't blame you, Managerin. Sangman nodded. Of course, he had no intention of leaking this story. Not only would that cause problems for Jinwoo, but the news wouldn't benefit either the guild or to the association. That's true, but... Sangnan was worried about something else. His boss could ruin everything by rushing into things without knowing Jinwoo's firm nature. Sangnan wanted to prevent that from happening. Sir, I don't think contacting him directly yourself is. Yunho realized what concerned Sangnan. Oh, it's not about recruitment. Sorry? Then why? It's like Jinwoo said. Yunho had realized something while listening to Heejin's statement. The White Tiger Guild owed Jinwoo. He'd saved 3 of their new recruits. Moreover, he'd stopped the White Tiger Guild's name from being tarnished by clearing the Red Gate. Even though it had been the association's mistake, their public image would have taken a dive if news regarding the loss of their recruits had gotten out. Just thinking about the possibility was awful and gave him chills. And despite that, I tried to interrogate him. Yunho now understood why Jinwoo had been so sour. He hadn't realized it at the time, but now that he was aware, he wanted to do something about it. As the president of the White Tiger Guild, I would like to officially thank Hunter Sung as well as apologize to him about yesterday. Oh well, if that's the case. His words won over Sangin. Knowing the president's straightforward personality, he wouldn't thank Jinwoo just to turn around and try to recruit him. Not to mention, Sangin also wanted to thank Jinwoo. Okay then. Sangin pulled out his phone and looked for Jinwoo's contact info. What's Jinwoo's number? President Beck also took out his phone to enter Jinwoo's number. The number is... Sangin stopped because he felt an intense pressure, and he turned his head. And why do you need it, Hunter Park? All right. Hee-Jin smiled awkwardly and furtively hit her phone, which was open to the Add New Contact page. The Hunters, Korea's #1 guild. Its president, an active S-rank hunter named Jong-in Choi, had just been delivered some interesting news. Has this been confirmed? No one would dare knock on his door to bring him misinformation. Myunki Jo, director of their recruiting team, nodded. Yes, I received this intel from the association today. All the large guilds had their own informants within the association. It wasn't something to be proud of, but this was how they got the jump on contacting high-rank awakened beings before anyone else. But their informant had told him something odd today. Only after agonizing over it had Myunki gone to the president's office. Since this is about White Tiger, the guild threatening our spot at the top, he thought it was worth reporting to the president. As Myunki had expected, Jong-in was very interested. 2 C-rank hunters survived a red gate where an A-rank and 6 B-rank hunters got killed. And they cleared the gate? This doesn't make sense. Even with that B-rank hunter. Jong-in shook his head as he read the memo. There must have been someone else not mentioned in this memo. He was certain of it. His extensive track record and experience with raids told him as much. Myunki continued. The association suspected this as well. However, White Tiger wouldn't talk. So the association let it go just like that? Since the incident was the association's fault, they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Jong-in tapped his chin. It was a force of habit, something he did when lost in thought. Never mind the association. Why was White Tiger being quiet? There could be only one reason. White Tiger got help from someone they don't want anyone else knowing about. I agree with you. They shared the same opinion. Jong-in's mind began to race. A nameless supporter who saved the low-rank hunters from a difficult dungeon where many high-rank hunters were killed. He was dying for some answers. Is it a new hunter who has yet to be diagnosed as an awakened being? Or a criminal whose identity needed to be concealed? It didn't matter either way. If this was a new hunter, the hunters would recruit them. If it was a criminal, the hunters would ruin White Tiger's reputation. Jong-in's eyes twinkled. We need to find out who was there. Do you have any ideas? You have to set a fire in the raccoon's den to catch the raccoon. Myunki's eyes lit up. Are you going to set White Tiger on fire? You think I'm crazy? Why would I set fire to someone else's property? Apologies. I just thought, since you're such an amazing mage hunter, he was known as the ultimate hunter for a reason. If Jong-in used his skills at full blast, blowing up a building would be like knocking down a house of cards. Jong-in explained. That's not what I mean. I'm saying we need to cause some trouble. So that's the fire. Jong-in's gaze turned fierce, and Myunki quieted. Let's leak something to the media. Brilliant. Myunki looked impressed. The Hunters Association's big mistake, the tragedy of a large guild, and the mystery behind it all. Wouldn't the press eat that up? My uncle nodded automatically. John laughed. If the White Tiger Guild is ambushed by the media, they'll have no choice but to reveal the mystery hunter. That's such a good idea. My uncle laughed with him. It was an excellent chance to deliver a huge blow to the White Tiger Guild, which had been hot on the hunter's heels. Jiangyan couldn't suppress his smile. Call the reporters immediately. You have entered the dungeon. Jinwoo took a deep breath as soon as he was inside. After being trapped in an outdoor-type dungeon for several days, the air in a cave-type dungeon felt different. Soon, Jinho entered as well. What kind of magic beasts do you think we'll run into here, boss? Who knows? I sensed something nearby, but... Jinwoo felt their presence, but didn't see anything. He took a step forward. The floor of the cave began to rise here and there. TH thud. TH thud. They were humanoid magic beasts made of stone. Jinho recalled hearing about them. Boss, these are stonemen. Jinwoo acknowledged him with a nod. These bastards were known for having the toughest hides among magic beasts found in low-ranked dungeons. Conventional wisdom said to use magic to defeat stonemen, but hang on to this for me. Jinwoo handed Jinho a plastic bag containing the cylinder and then walked toward the stonemen. Gasp. Jinho flinched, convinced the bag held some kind of weapon, but nothing happened. Is it not a weapon? In the meantime, Jinwoo equipped Barca's dagger and Night Killer. Shunk! The head of a stoneman rolled away. Jinwoo admired Barca's dagger with a pleased grin. Not bad. Suddenly, Jinwoo disappeared from view. TMP. 10 or so stonemen fell to the ground just before Jinwoo reappeared behind them. Crumble. I feel so much lighter and faster on my feet since I got out of the red gate. That was only natural, as Jinwoo's current level was 60. After defeating Ice Bears and Ice Slayers, he'd leveled up 9 times, from level 51 to level 60. Now, C-rank magic beasts felt like the goblins found in E-rank dungeons. I don't even think I need weapons here. That was good enough for a warm-up. Should I speed things up then? It was time to summon his shadow soldiers. As if on cue, a group of stonemen came lumbering toward them from inside the cave. Summon. With his order, shadow soldiers hidden within Jinwoo's shadow quietly formed behind him. This was followed by a scream of terror. Guy ahead! Oh, right. Jinwoo smacked his own forehead and turned around. He's here too. Jinwoo had been having so much fun that he'd forgotten Jinho was with him. BB boss? From where he'd fallen on the ground, Jinho pointed at the shadow soldiers. WH, what are these? It's too complicated to explain, but it's one of my skills. You have the SS skill to summon these things? Jinwoo replied with a nod. Jinho couldn't close his mouth. This was Jinho's 11th dive into a dungeon with Jinwoo. He thought himself incapable of being surprised by now, but clearly he was wrong. Jinwoo had exceeded his expectations once again. Gulp. Jinho had trouble swallowing as he eyed the soldiers in their black armor emitting savage energy. Jinwoo glanced in the other direction. The slow-moving stonemen had gotten closer. Jinwoo directed the soldiers at the beasts. Go! His minions bolted, as if they'd been waiting for his cue. TH thud. Because almost 40 soldiers moved at once, the floor of the cave quaked. Thanks to the addition of bigger shadow soldiers, like Iron and the shadow beasts, the overall weight of the army had increased significantly. It's like I'm looking at a squadron of tanks. Jinwoo wore a satisfied look on his face. The soldiers stormed the place, and the dungeon was cleared in no time. All that was left were the remains of the stone inn, which sort of resembled cookie crumbs. A C-rank dungeon decimated, just like that. Whoa, Jinwoo was impressed. If I keep this up, we'll complete the rest of the raids in a snap. It shouldn't take too long to finish the remaining 8. TMP, TMP, TMP. At the end of the battle, the shadow soldiers assigned to collect essence stones stood at attention before Jinwoo. Igris and Iron, the 2 knight ranks, were positioned at the front. Once all the soldiers stopped moving, Jinho sheepishly made his way to Jinwoo's side. "Here, boss!" Jinho returned the plastic bag Jinwoo had given him earlier. Jinwoo grabbed the travel mug out of the bag and took a sip. "What's that, boss?" "Vegetable juice." I tried it recently, and it's pretty good." Slurp, slurp, slurp. When the mug was almost empty, Jinwoo turned to Jinho. "How many gates did you book today?" Jinho was cautiously trying to touch the fur of a shadow beast but stopped and turned to Jinwoo. "4 in total." That would leave 5 more dungeons if he did 4 today. There was no need to drag this out longer. "Okay, let's wrap everything up by tomorrow, even if it means we have to travel far." "Tomorrow?" Jinho inspected his surroundings. He saw the stonemen's remains scattered everywhere. If he keeps going at this speed, there won't be any issues. "You got it, boss. By the way," Jinho hesitated a bit before continuing. "Is it okay if I'm the one who collects essence stones?" "Why?" "It kind of feels like they've stolen my place, boss. It's a little upsetting." Jinwoo burst out laughing. He's special for sure. And finally, the next day, Jinwoo fulfilled his promise to Jinho and completed all 19 raids.